I love it. I love it. I love it. Look at this. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
Yes guys, what's up? Leighton here for UFC Gambling Addicts, back again for another UFC full card breakdown and predictions video. Before we move any further, be sure to head kick the like button and tag up that subscribe button too. As always, the support you guys showed me on my last breakdown, absolutely beautiful. Thank you again for that support. Before we get into UFC 250, the breakdowns and predictions for this one, we're going to do what we always do. We're going to do a post recap of the last card and speak about the bets. If you don't want to hear that, you can use the timestamps below to skip ahead. So before we get into the recap, the bets, 9 out of 11 on predictions. But that's not the bets. As you can see with all these parlays, a lot of money coming in on Tyron Woodley. And even the cover bet, you know, I was a little bit, well, not a little bit, I was very greedy with the cover bet, wanting to assure good profit. And instead of covering Burns outright, I did choose Burns TKO or sub, and that didn't happen. So yeah, prediction wise, very good card, 9 out of 11. Bet wise, not so good. Okay, so a quick recap of that card for anyone that wants to hear my opinions on those fights. Chris Gutierrez and Morales, what can you say? The low kick landed time and time again, even in the small octagon for Chris Gutierrez. That was the story of that fight. Casey Kenny and Louis Smolka, good fight. I mean, Casey Kenny just too much power, too big for Louis Smolka, and the way he got it done with the arm triangle, the arm guillotine, I believe, beautiful. Brandon Royval and Tim Elliott, this was a very good fight. Tim Elliott, a lot of wrestling, a lot of scrambling, and you have to give credit to Brandon Royval, man. You have to give that credit to him. He was taken down a few times. He was fighting against a veteran in Tim Elliott, and he did get it done on the mat. You know, that's how we expected Brandon Royval to win that fight. Tim Elliott, you know, showed a lot of experience, a lot of veteranship in that fight. Kept going, but it didn't put the newcomer off. So credit to Brandon Royval. If you made that pick, well done. Jamal Hill and Clinton Abreu. This was a beautiful performance from Jamal Hill. Nasty digging knee to the body. Yeah, beautiful. Daniel Rodriguez, good performance against Gabe Green. Short notice fight. The power looked good. Fundamentals looked good. Very decent performance from Dan Rodriguez. Caitlin Chikadze, this was my only underdog pick of the night. And it was beautiful. You know, completely dominant performance over Antonina Shevchenko. And yeah, man, now that I rethink about my breakdown for that fight, you know, I pictured Caitlin basically point fighting a lot, but yeah, she went straight in there and basically sent a message to her sister. You know, this is how you beat me. I'm going to beat your sister like this. So really nice performance there. Mackenzie Dern and Hannah Cifers. Now, Hannah Cifers was performing well in this fight. The only mistake she made was posturing up and staying in Mackenzie Dern's guard, basically. And as soon as Mackenzie went for the ankle and rolled into the knee bar, it was all over. You know, Mackenzie Dern's foundation is BJJ, and even if you're on top, that's dangerous. Roosevelt Roberts, technician over Brock Weaver. Beautiful performance, able to get it done as well on the mat with a beautiful rear naked choke. Billy Quarantillo and Spike Carlyle. This was a very fun fight. Spike Carlyle coming out real quick in that first round. Billy weathering the storm. Yeah, really close fight. Really good fight. Spike just really slowed down in there. Used a lot of energy early on. And Billy just, you know, keeping at a steady pace, was able to just edge out Spike in that fight. Augusto Sakai and Blagoy Ivanov. Another good fight, very close fight as well. Sakai just a little bit more damaging with his kicks, I believe. Really could have gone either way on the split. But yeah, good fight. Now, main event. For those of you who took Burns, great shout. Tyron Woodley, just that vacant expression on his face, you know, being held up against the fence. You know, just nothing there. Nothing there from Tyron Woodley. And there's no excuse. There's absolutely no excuse because he has been training, you know, even for Leon Edwards and then calling out Colby. You know, Tyron Woodley has been training and there's just no excuse to perform like that. Gun shy, you know, even had to like kind of clap himself into the fight at one point after getting hit. So yeah, I don't know what's going on with Tyron Woodley. Seems to be definitely towards the end of his career now. But you cannot take anything away from Burns. You can't. Burns came out. He was the aggressor. He was the guy dictating the kickboxing and the grappling, really. You know, Burns was on fire. And Tyron Woodley just looked like a man who showed up for a paycheck pretty much. You know, it hurts to say that because I like T Wood. I do like him. There's not really many fighters I dislike. I don't really cover this sport to dislike fighters. But yeah, a little bit embarrassing and disappointing for Tyron Woodley. But on the flip side, Burns, brilliant performance. Alright guys, let's get into breaking down and making predictions for UFC 250. Fight number 1 on this card, we have Evan Dunham versus Herbert the Blaze Burns. And we're going to start with the veteran. So Evan Dunham comes into this fight, 11 wins, 8 losses, 1 draw inside the UFC. Over 20 fights at the highest level of mixed martial arts. As we always say on this channel, a veteran's veteran. He's seen it all, he can do it all. However, fighting is a young man's game. And as you can see from the last 2 fights of Evan Dunham's career, he's weak to the body. A bit like Fluffy Hernandez. The only difference is Evan has become weak to the body over time. The opponent, Herbert Burns, comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. Also fought on the Contender Series where he showcased his BJJ. Burns, just like his brother, is primarily a jiu-jitsu fighter. However, we look at his UFC debut and it's clear to see Burns will look to use his Muay Thai on the feet. Huge knee in his debut. Absolutely beautiful knockout. Can Evan Dunham win this fight? Purely answering that question based off of experience and know-how, I would say yes. Just like Matt Brown the other week with Miguel Baeza. Experience and know-how will carry you. However, Herbert Burns is fresher. He's younger. He's most likely the more confident guy. I feel way more of a threat with Burns in this fight. In a kickboxing scenario and on the mat, this is Herbert Burns' fight to win, I believe. So for those reasons, I'm going to start this card off with picking Herbert Burns via TKO in round number 2. And I haven't even got the odds up. I've seen no odds on this card, so I'm just going to pull them up. Not even cut this off. Okay, so we have Herbert Burns coming in minus 220. Evan Dunham coming back close to plus 200. Those odds are a little bit high. I'd put Burns maybe down minus 170. But yeah, maybe one play on Herbert Burns there. Evan Dunham, man, nearly plus 200 with all that experience. I mean, if you're leaning on that side, maybe a small play, but for me, Herbert Burns is the pick there. Fight number 2, we have Alonzo Menifield versus Devin Brown Bear Clark. And we're going to start with Alonzo first. So Alonzo comes into this fight 2-0 inside the UFC. Primarily a stand and bang type of guy. Let me land that huge punch type of guy. That's what we've seen so far in his first 2 UFC fights. Paul Craig and I believe Vinicius Moreira both brutally finished inside that first round. We have to assume that's the game plan for Menifield. First round destruction. That's all we've seen. You know, this guy isn't looking to go 15. He isn't looking to test his cardio. He's looking to take your head off as soon as he can inside that first round. The opponent, Devin Clark, comes into this fight 5-4 inside the UFC, primarily a wrestler inside the octagon. In my opinion, Devin Clark is a very undersized fighter for the 205 division. If he's able to outwork his opponent, avoid knockout punches, look to take down his opponent, or even work his opponent up against the fence, that's when we see Devin perform well at 205. If he isn't able to do those things, such as out-wrestle the opponent, have better cardio, better footwork, those type of things, we don't see Devin perform well in this division. Devin is the more experienced fighter and the better wrestler, in my opinion. On the flip side, Alonzo Menifield is looking for round one destruction. I believe this could be a case of literally one or the other. We haven't seen Alonzo fight outside the first round. He's got a lot of muscle, and we know muscle requires oxygen. If Devin can survive that first round, similar to what Overeem had to do with Walt Harris, then we could really see the fight play out for Devin. Alonzo most likely has to hurt and finish Devin in that first round. That's his best chance to win this fight. It's a difficult one to predict, but I'm going to go with that first round destruction. I just feel more comfortable being on that side. So I'm going to take Alonzo Menifield via TKO in round number 1. When we take a look at some odds, we have Alonzo coming in -220, which is, again, a little deep. Devin Clark +180, +175, +185. Yeah, I mean, if Devin survives in that first round, he really could use his experience, his wrestling, his work ethic to beat Alonzo. But if Alonzo is confident in that first round, doesn't get taken down, and just lands some devastating knockout punches on Devin Clark, who is undersized for 205, man, it could go either way. But for me, Alonzo Menifield is going to have to be the pick. Moving into the next one, we have Jussier Formiga versus Alex Perez. This is a very good matchup at, I believe, 125. Should be 125. So we're going to start with the Brazilian, Jussier Formiga. Comes into this fight 9-6 inside the UFC. Primarily a jiu-jitsu fighter inside the octagon. A guy we know very, very well at 125. A veteran at 125. Jussier's last 2 fights haven't gone his way. Joey B was able to use his veteran experience to finish Formiga again. And my boy Brandon Moreno using that new composed striking to cash in as a dog against Formiga. Is it fair to say Jussier is on a slow decline? Personally, I would say so. Does that mean he can't compete at the highest level? No, it doesn't. The opponent, Alex Perez, comes into this fight 5 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Alex is a good fighter, man. Even thinking back to his win over Jose Torres, the amount of strikes landed in just, I believe, 4 minutes or so, extremely impressive. The only time Alex Perez has ever been put in danger and become unstuck inside the octagon was against Joey B, which all of us understand, right? Joey B is Joey B, man. This is still a difficult fight to predict. Despite feeling like Jussier is on a slow decline, we know how good of a grappler Formiga is. The flip side is Perez has shown good, strong grappling too. Not against the caliber of grapplers like Formiga, but he has shown good grappling. If we're looking at freshness, striking, toughness, confidence, the confidence to kickbox, all of this points towards Alex Perez in my opinion. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Alex Perez via TKO in round number 2. And these odds are looking much better than the first 2 fights. This is much better. Alex Perez -130, -135. Formiga +110, +115. Yeah, this matchup resembles those odds because Formiga's a veteran and we know he can backpack anyone, right? He can take your back the way he did against Sergio Pettis, and that's it for the rest of the round. You know, he is that good of a grappler. Perez has to be careful with that. Look to keep this fight upright, and if he can, I think he can beat Formiga. So yeah, -130, I'm willing to take that. Fight number 4 on this card, we have Charles Kid Dynamite Byrd versus Maki Coconut Bombs Pitolo. And we're going to start with Charles Byrd. So Charles comes into this fight 1 win, 2 losses inside the UFC. Training out of Fortis MMA, I believe. Charles is primarily a grappler inside the octagon. A wrestler who will use his BJJ when he's on the mat. His only win was in his UFC debut. It was an impressive performance too. Quickly took down John Phillips and got the choke. Since that fight, Charles has been kinda exposed. If you can make the fight somewhat a tough fight, it appears you can break Charles Byrd. The opponent, Maki Pitolo, comes into this fight 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Entered the UFC by way of the Contender Series. Maki's Contender Series performance had me pretty excited. To see him debut against Caleb Potter, you know, I look at the Contender Series fight and I'm like, okay, I can see what you're going to do against Caleb Potter. And it just didn't happen. That fight did not go down as I expected. Caleb was able to use his foundation, which is jiu-jitsu. So back to the drawing board for Maki Pitolo. Takedown defense, takedown defense, takedown defense. That's what Maki needs to work on. Also the ability to get up off the mat. We have to assume that Maki has gone back and worked on this. Charles will look to expose Maki's takedown defense like it was exposed in his UFC debut. And Maki just has to, you know, show us, look, I'm not going to lose this type of fight again. We know what Charles Byrd wants to go out there and do. This is what I'm going to do. You know, it's literally going to be one or the other. Whether you're willing to take a shot and say, look, we know how Maki lost the debut, but is he going to lose this way again, or has he improved that area? You have to be the person that decides that. For me, I'm going to put some faith into Maki Pitolo. I'm going to say he has gone back to the drawing board, worked on takedown defense, worked on getting back up off the mat and looking to keep the fight upright. And if he can do that and make it, like I said, somewhat of a tough fight against Charles Byrd, I think he can make Charles wilt and potentially get the finish. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Maki Pitolo via TKO in round number 2. Oh, okay. Maki Pitolo coming in. We got an underdog. So my personal opinion is Maki Pitolo, a little bit of faith going into him. Maybe he does stop the takedown. I am outweighed with that opinion. More people think that Charles Byrd's going to go in there, take down Maki, which is plausible. You know, he's fighting out of Fortis MMA, which is a very good camp. Charles has pretty much looked to do the same thing every fight. So it's not like he's going to be a striker in this fight. You know, he is going to use his wrestling and his BJJ to beat Maki. It is literally one or the other. Maki has to show us improvements or not. It's one or the other, but he's an underdog and I'm willing to take that shot. Fight number 5, we have Cody Stamann versus Brian Kelleher. And we're going to start with the wrestler. So Cody Stamann comes into this fight 4 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw inside the UFC. Primarily a wrestler inside the octagon. A wrestler that's become a good pressure boxer over time. Cody will use his boxing to transition into his wrestling. That type of style is so hard to beat inside the octagon, especially when the wrestler becomes such a solid boxer, just like Cody has, in my opinion. Looking back at his last fight against Song Yadong, I personally felt Cody should have been given the win that night. I felt he'd done enough, despite being on Song Yadong too. And same thing with Marlon Vera, you know. I was on Song Yadong and I felt Marlon Vera edged that fight. So make no mistake, guys, these judges are protecting Song Yadong. But back to Cody Stamann. This guy's a strong wrestler. If you've ever seen Cody Stamann fight, we know what he's about. relentless wrestling. He's very strong. He's going to keep you on the outside with his boxing and then wrestle. You know, he's going to keep mixing it up between both of those arts, and you're going to struggle in there with him. That's the type of guy he is. You know, he's a little bit like a Khabib. Wrestle, pressure box, wrestle, and it's relentless and it's strong. Cody Stamann is a good fighter. The opponent, Brian Kelleher, comes into this fight 5 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a jiu-jitsu fighter who's also become a good striker. You know, we find evidence of that just a few weeks ago. Brian was able to finish Hunter with a nasty lead hook. Beautiful lead hook. A technique I've actually been practicing a lot on the heavy bag. You know, that lead hook is something you need to get down. Grappler versus grappler. Brian is coming off a very good win just a few days ago. He's going to have the confidence to step right back inside the octagon and look to put away Cody in similar fashion. The only difference in this one for me is Cody will look to use his wrestling, whereas Hunter didn't. Brian was the fighter looking for the takedown against Hunter, whereas this time, you know, Cody isn't going to not use that wrestling because of Brian's jiu-jitsu, whereas Hunter didn't look to use his wrestling because of Brian's jiu-jitsu. I think this time Cody will, you know, Cody is a wrestler who will stick to wrestling. And that's what I believe would be the difference in this fight. Now, if Brian Kelleher can prove me wrong again, I'm going to personally try bring this guy onto my channel and legit tell him like, yo, Brian, I've gone against you in your last 3 fights and you've proved me wrong every time. Like, well done. But I'm going to stick, man. I'm not just going to pick Brian because, look, I got Brian's last fight wrong and the fight before that with O'Day. I really think Cody Stamann is a good wrestler, good pressure boxing, relentless, good conditioning, strong. And that's why I'm going to pick Cody Stamann. But like I said, if Brian proves me wrong, this guy's getting tweeted left, right and centre. But yeah, Cody Stamann via decision. Okay, so taking a look at the odds, we have, oh my good God. We have Cody Stamann nearly minus 300, which is a little bit crazy considering what we just saw Brian Kelleher do just a few days ago. But yeah, Brian Kelleher coming back nearly plus 230. If a few of you guys want to take a shot on that, I wouldn't say no, because Brian has proved me wrong in his last 2 fights. But yeah, for me, I'm not even going to touch that fight. I'm just going to watch that fight. No bets on that fight for me. And if Brian can do it, fair enough. But yeah, the pick is Cody Stamann. Fight number 6, we have Ian, the Hurricane Heinisch versus GM3, Gerald Meerschaert. I'm going to start with Ian. So Ian comes into this fight 2 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. A wrestler inside the octagon. For those of you who don't know, Ian has had a tough time in life, man. Jailed for smuggling narcotics. Completely changed his life around. And he's done well in the UFC so far, in my opinion. You don't need to be perfect to do well. Yes, Ian isn't the most composed fighter. His striking isn't exactly Conor McGregor level, but he is a hard worker. Work ethic is where Ian excels, in my opinion. The opponent, GM3, comes into this fight 6-4 inside the UFC, primarily a jiu-jitsu fighter inside the octagon, a black belt to be precise. Both of these guys are grapplers. GM3 more BJJ orientated, Ian more of a wrestler than a BJJ guy. GM3 had a nice striking performance in his last fight against Deron Winn, a guy who's very undersized to be striking at 185. I'd say GM3 is the better kicker out of him and Ian, but on the flip side I'd say Ian has more chance of catching GM3 with some damaging punches up top. This is just one of these fights in my opinion that could go either way. A strong part of me wants to take GM3 here, especially with his experience advantage. But man, I like the work ethic of Ian Heinisch. He's still evolving. hard worker, power in his punches. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Ian Heinisch here to win a decision over GM3, and most likely a very close one too. And we have Ian coming in minus 125. Yeah, that's what I feel. GM3 returning plus 110. That's basically a pick'em. You know, that fight really does go either way. Both guys grapplers, different styles when it comes to grappling. GM3 more experienced, but Ian, bit more fresh, bit more power in the punch. Man, that is a tough one to predict, but for me, Ian Heinisch is the pick there. Chase, the Dream Hooper versus Alex, Bruce Leroy Caceres. This fight really is a tough one to predict. We're going to start with Chase Hooper. Chase comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC, a jiu-jitsu fighter, a lifelong jiu-jitsu practitioner actually. At only 20 years old, he's grappled pretty much his whole life. Looking back at Hooper's debut, it's clear to see his kickboxing does need to improve, his power needs to improve, and that will come as he gets older. You know, a little bit like Sean O'Malley. Looking back 2-3 years ago, we needed to see Sean grow into a man a little bit more, you know, and he has. That will happen to Chase Hooper. However, he still got it done in his debut. He was able to take down Tamer, force him to the mat, and he searched for that submission and he got it. Huge debut moment for Chase Hooper. You have to respect it. The opponent, Alex Caceres, comes into this fight 10-10 inside the UFC. A striker inside the octagon. An ultimate gatekeeper. And the reason for that is because Alex has a fun style to watch. Constantly on his bike, using fancy kicks. Just ninja stuff. Bruce Lee stuff, you know? We know Alex doesn't have good takedown defense. Steven Peterson and Kron Gracie both able to take down Alex Caceres. Staying upright against Chase Hooper is going to be very, very important for Alex Caceres in this fight. Striker versus grappler. Caceres will look to use his experience in this fight. He has fought a lot of guys who are better strikers than Chase Hooper. That's not where Alex Caceres needs to worry in this fight. It's the takedown and the takedown only, in my opinion. Chase needs to worry about the striking of Alex Caceres, and the striking only, in my opinion. That's what makes this matchup fun. Both guys have to watch out for the vice versa. The universe is telling me that no matter how much Caceres moves, no matter how many kicks he lands, I just have a feeling that Chase is going to get him to the mat. He's going to get that takedown. And he's going to use that smothering BJJ to find the neck of Alex Caceres. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Chase Hooper via submission in round number 2. We take a look at the odds, man. Chase Hooper nearly minus 200, which is a little deep. I know, you know, that price is up there because we see Alex Caceres as a gatekeeper who hasn't got good takedown defense, and that is kind of true. But Alex Caceres has a lot of experience, and if he can keep it upright, target the calves and the midsection of Chase, you know, being able to get back up off the mat, that plus 160, plus 170 looks good on Caceres. But I just have a feeling, man, no matter how good this fight goes for Caceres, whether it's 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5, into the second round, I think Chase Hooper is going to end up on top at some point, and he's going to get that submission. Alright, homies, you know what time it is. If you haven't head kicked the like button, make sure you do that. If you haven't tagged up the subscribe button, make sure you do that. If you've waited to smoke with me, amen. If you've been smoking this whole time and you're smoking now, amen. If you enjoy the smoke breaks and you're not a smoker, triple amen. Alright, guys. So as you know, I spoke a few cards back about training, you know, and I've been speaking about training a bit, and I've been doing some sparring recently, man, and I'm falling in love with it more and more. You know, the love I have to watch the highest level of mixed martial arts, break down these fights, stay updated with all of these guys each month, each year. That love is becoming a part of training as well. You know, I'm really enjoying training. And I've been training with sparring with a couple guys who are actually inside Cage Warriors Academy. And literally on my first session with one of these guys, you know, he wanted to test my grappling, right? Because I haven't been doing this. Not physically. I watch it mentally and I know what's happening mentally. But physically, I'm new to it. But after I grappled this guy, right, he's about 15 pounds lighter than me. I grappled this guy, took me down. Actually, no, I went for a takedown, a single leg. And he told me before, look, when you put your head here, you know what the opponent's going to do. They're going to take the neck and they're going to pull guard with the choke. I knew that's what he was going to do to me, right? But as he did that, I instantly rolled with him with a little scramble, right? He took my back instantly in this scramble, got both of the hooks in. But as he took my back, I grabbed one of his wrists. I knew this wrist needed to be controlled, right? And I ended up grabbing the wrist, trapping it, waiting a little bit. And then I scrambled, ended up on top in his full guard. And literally he said to me at that very moment, "You're not a beginner." And that felt so good. Because physically, I'm a beginner when it comes to this stuff, but mentally, you know, if you say to me, have you seen the last 4,000, 5,000 UFC fights, 3,000? I'd say, yeah, I've seen every single one, not missed one, you know. But yeah, training, man, training has been beautiful. I've enjoyed every moment of it, you know, even the little aches, the pains, the clicking of the bones when you get up in the morning, feels good. As always, if you disagree with any of my breakdowns, make sure you leave a comment with your disagreements, your agreements. We're not going to agree on every fight. And that's the beauty of this as well, you know. I respect you guys respect me. We love engaging in the comments. Let's keep that going always. Agree or disagree though, the main thing is that you enjoy this channel and you enjoy the breakdowns. So, you know, whether you go through this full card and we have 8 disagreements, if you enjoyed listening to me break them down, I greatly appreciate that, you know. And you guys always let me know that in the comment section. You know, I see the regular names all the time. I see new names all the time as well. And that's a beautiful feeling. Okay, let's get back into... Actually, no, one thing before I finish this smoke break. Because I always get the comment saying, if you want to take your training seriously, stop smoking. And I don't look at that comment and think, wow, that guy's a bit of an a-hole. You know, I don't see the world black and white. You know, if it's a bad comment, it's a very bad comment. If it's a good comment, it's a very good comment. I see that comment as advice. That's advice, man, and that advice is correct. I'll have you know, this is like my 10th smoke of the week. You know, normally there'd be 10 plus a day. So cutting down, you know, you got to start somewhere, right? Let's get into breaking down this main card. Fight number 8 on this card, we have Sean Sugar O'Malley, or Sugar Sean O'Malley, versus Eddie Wineland. And we're going to start with the stoner, Sean O'Malley. So Sean comes into this fight 3-0 inside the UFC, primarily a striker inside the octagon, and quite an unorthodox one too. Sean had that time off, returned after a couple years or so, and we saw how much Sean evolved. He is a very tricky guy to figure out. You know, with those 2 years off, he became way more tricky. He doubled in that trickery, basically, in my opinion. Loves to strike out of both stances, very long for the 135 division, and really quick too. Sean O'Malley, in my opinion, is a prospect, man. I didn't feel his potential against guys like Terrion Ware, you know, but watching his comeback fight against Nunes, man, it's clear to see this guy is a prospect now. The opponent, Eddie Wineland, comes into this fight 6 wins, 7 losses inside the UFC. This will be his 14th UFC fight. A powerful puncher, a tough guy, pretty much a veteran at this point. Eddie has taken some damage over the years, and that's because of the type of guy he is, you know, the type of style he fights with. Bites down on the mouthpiece and walks forward, forces you to fight his fight. That's exactly what he did in his last fight against Grigory Popov. If Eddie had it his way, he'd have a firefight with Sean O'Malley. However, that's not what Sean is going to want to do in this fight. He'll use a lot of movement, a lot of switching of the stances, a variety of kicks, pretty much what he did with Quinones. The difference is, Quinones has better footwork than Eddie, and he's a better kicker. The worry for Sean in this fight will purely be Eddie's boxing. I think Sean will have a lot of opportunities to land meaningful strikes during these rounds with Eddie Wineland. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Sean O'Malley via decision. And we take a look at some odds if I can find them. Jesus Christ, Sean O'Malley coming in minus 500. Eddie Wineland returning plus 400. So yeah, when I say that Sean O'Malley has become a real prospect in those 2 years off with that return fight, I think everyone agrees with me. You know, there's not much more to say there. Should you play that line? Probably not, but yeah, do what you got to do there, guys. My pick is Sean O'Malley. Fight number 9, we have Neil Magny versus Tony Martin. The OG Tony Martin, not Anthony Rocco Martin. This is Tony Martin. We're going to start with Neil Magny. Neil comes into this fight 15 wins, 6 losses inside the UFC. This will be Neil's 22nd UFC fight, which is pretty impressive. Neil had a very nice performance in his last fight. Used his grappling a lot in that fight against the Leech. Used that veteran experience to his advantage. And you have to say, you know, credit to Neil Magny there. Really, really beautiful performance. Tony Martin comes into this fight 9-5 inside the UFC, training out of ATT. Tony has improved a lot over the years. His striking, the head kick that pretty much finished Ryan LaFleur was beautiful. Since stepping up to 170, Tony Martin has been a different fighter. He's strong in this weight class. He's quick. The striking looks sharper with each fight. Even the calf kicks Tony was landing in his last fight, you have to take note of that. This is a tough fight to predict. Neil really showed us he's not a gatekeeper in his last bout. On the flip side, will Neil be able to control and ragdoll Tony Martin the way he did the Leech? If you're looking at the fact that Tony used to compete at 155, maybe that answers your question with yes. But then again, the answer could be no. Tony is a wrestler, unlike the Leech. He's more agile too. There's many ways you can look at this fight. For me, I think if Tony implements those low kicks, pressures Neil a lot, I see him performing well in this fight. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Tony Martin via decision. We take a look at some odds. We have Tony Martin coming in plus 120, plus 125. Neil Magny returning a small favourite. And you know, if Neil Magny didn't perform so brilliantly against the Leech, I see this fight being a complete pick'em. I really do. But yeah, Neil Magny, man, he's a veteran. He's got a long reach. He's going to pop that jab and potentially look to wrestle if he needs to. But Tony Martin with those low kicks, just becoming a better fighter every fight. I do have to take that money, the plus money on Tony Martin. Now this one's a very, very good matchup. We have Aljamain Funkmaster Sterling versus Corey Sandhagen. And we're going to start with the Funkmaster. So Aljamain Sterling comes into this fight 10 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. A top 135er. A very, very good wrestler inside the octagon. Now on a 4-fight win streak. It feels like it's been some time since Marlon Moraes completely sent Aljamain Sterling to another realm. You know, since that devastating TKO, Aljo has bounced back consistently, fight after fight, performing very well at 135. Even the knee bar that he got against Cody Stamann, you know, that fight, such an impressive performance. The opponent, Corey Sandhagen, comes into this fight 5-0 inside the UFC. Primarily the new Dominic Cruz inside the octagon. Literally. Corey loves to switch his stance, constantly using unorthodox footwork, really tricky to figure out inside the octagon. No one yet to figure out Corey Sandhagen. Now this matchup, in my opinion, is probably the hardest matchup to predict on this card. Both of these guys are deserving of title shots. Both of these guys are top 135ers. I think Aljo is probably the better grappler. Although Corey can scramble well, he's very long and he will use his BJJ to counteract the wrestling of Aljamain Sterling. If this fight is kept upright, Corey will welcome that pretty much all day. Corey does want to keep this fight standing. Both of these fighters will want to do different things inside the octagon. Aljo would be wise to use his wrestling. Corey needs to simply fight his fight, which is staying upright, being crazy unorthodox, just keeping Aljo guessing, I've never picked against Corey Sandhagen. And, he has been a dog a couple times, but I think Aljo is potentially the better mixed martial artist here. He has good experience inside the octagon. So does Corey at this point, but Aljo to me just sticks out a little bit more in this matchup. I think the wrestling, the leg kicks, the constant pressure, the conditioning. Aljamain Sterling has everything to beat Corey Sandhagen. And Corey could win this fight too. He's very unorthodox. He's one of my favourite fighters. But I'm going to take Aljamain Sterling to use his wrestling. He's a very strong wrestler. And I think if he can take down and nullify Corey Sandhagen, he has a good chance in winning this potentially, number one contender fight. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Aljamain Sterling via decision. And we look at the odds, man. The odds are spot on. How do you pick this matchup? This matchup is the hardest matchup to predict. Whether you're a massive Corey Sandhagen fan, like I am, or you're a fan of Aljamain Sterling, this fight really goes either way. It's going to be a close one, I think. For me, I'm gonna take Aljo despite never picking against Corey. Co-main event, we have Rafael Assuncao versus Cody No Love Garbrandt. And we're going to start with Rafael Assuncao, the Brazilian. So Assuncao comes into this fight 11 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. A veteran of the 135 division, a household name in the bantamweight division. Assuncao can do it all. He's a very, very good kicker. Jiu-jitsu, very good as well. But he is 37 years old now, which means he is on a decline. We find evidence of that in his last 2 fights. Granted, those fights were Maryna Moroz and Corey Sandhagen. He did look slower in these fights. He just didn't seem like the Assuncao of a few years back. The opponent, Cody Garbrandt, comes into this fight 6 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. The former 135 champion, primarily a boxer inside the octagon. Cody is on a 3-fight losing streak. His last win coming back in 2016, so it's been a while. Looking back at his last fight against Pedro Munoz, Pedro done a brilliant job of targeting the calf of Cody. A lot of people think that Cody just overcommit in that fight. In reality, he was actually made to overcommit. He was made to brawl. His calf was completely brutalized. So both of these guys are on losing streaks, which makes this matchup more fun already. Cody will use his boxing, whereas Assuncao is going to potentially target the calves and the midsection with kicks. I know pretty much everyone listening to this right now, I'm going to say we're 50-50. That's the type of matchup, again, that we have here. Is it going to be the boxing of Cody that prevails, or does Assuncao look to do what Pedro Munoz did with the low kicks? It's such a tough one to predict again. I even took Pedro to beat Cody. And I rate Assuncao a better kicker than Pedro Munoz. But here's the difference. When you lose to low kicks, you go back to the drawing board, you fix a couple things. And that's what I'm going to have to go with here. I think Assuncao is becoming a slower fighter, really leaving his prime more and more with each fight. Whereas Cody, he is on a 3-fight losing streak, but I think he's a very, very good boxer. And if he's gone back to the drawing board, fixed that low calf kick area, that weakness, I think he could get his first win since 2016. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Cody Garbrandt via TKO in round number 2. And I don't have the odds up at the moment, but I'm actually just going to pull them up and not cut this out because my internet works quick. Okay, Cody Garbrandt, -140, -135. Rafael Assuncao coming back, a small underdog, only +125. I agree with that line, you know. Cody should really bounce back in this fight. He should use his boxing. He's quicker, he's fresher, despite those 3 losses, right? Assuncao, he's going to have to look to do what Pedro Munoz done, or even take down Cody, you know. It's a really tough one to predict. And I think there is going to be quite a few people taking Assuncao, you know, knowing he's a better kicker than Pedro. And we see what Pedro done with the kicks. But for me, I'm going to have to take Cody in this one. Main event time, homies. We have Amanda, the Lioness Nunes, versus Felicia, Phenom Spencer. And we're going to start with the Brazilian. Amanda Nunes comes into this fight 12 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. The 135 champion, the 145 champion. Amanda last defended her 35 strap. Now she's defending the 45 strap. How can anyone deny this woman is the GOAT of women's MMA? Amanda Nunes is a complete fighter. She's a brilliant boxer with heavy power. She's quick. She can kick brilliantly too. Just look at the head kick that she put down Holly with. She's physically strong. Amanda Nunes is without a doubt 10 out of 10 for a fighter. The opponent, Felicia Spencer, comes into this fight 2-1 inside the UFC. A grappler inside the octagon. A jiu-jitsu fighter. Spencer had a brilliant debut. Very, very good debut. And then completely thrown into the deep end against Cyborg, which was never going to end well. But in all honesty, Spencer, you know, she was dominated, but she never gave up. So credit to that. You know, that's like a win in a type of way. Then we look at Spencer's last fight. Complete domination again, just like in her debut. Very, very good grappling. And the ground and pound to finish it this time, you know. Felicia Spencer, without a doubt a grappler. That is what she's dangerous at. Her striking, I don't really see her having much success there with the striking, but for a grappler, she's a big girl, she's strong, she's heavy. I'm not going to beat around the bush too much on this one. Striker versus grappler. The GOAT versus a prospect. I'm taking Amanda Nunes. I believe she excels in every area over Felicia, especially boxing. Has Spencer got a chance? Of course, this is a fight. Spencer will have to take down Amanda and take the back or take an arm. Something quick, potentially when both fighters are dry too. But I can't take that. I think Amanda Nunes potentially destroys Felicia Spencer maybe as quick as she destroyed Ronda. You know, that's how good Amanda is, man. It's undeniable. My pick is Amanda Nunes via TKO in round number 1. And we take a look at the odds, man. Amanda coming in a ridiculous -600, which is pretty warranted. You know, it is pretty warranted. Felicia Spencer returning +450. Is it worth a go? I mean, if you think she can take down Amanda when they're dry, or even if Amanda gets tired and can't put away Felicia, if you think Felicia can do it, have a go. But for me, no plays on this one. Or if I do play it, it will just be Amanda Nunes TKO. Alright guys, as always, I've enjoyed breaking down these fights and making predictions. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know in the comments. As always, let's get engaging. Peace.